of owning a cafe and other heroic deeds by Beware the Tristado. Chapter 38, Feline Family. Monday morning saw his regular rush of customers after he, Katsuki, Izuku, and Hitoshi went for their 5:45 run, and, feeling buoyed after his weekend treats, the iris-haired boy had returned to school, his two friends walking him most of the way. Such good kids. Mimi-chan and the girls had come by with Sora, who'd be having her baby soon, and was craving onigiri drizzled with chocolate sauce. Who was he to deny her? Their eyes astonished by the space as they wandered inside the enclosure with paint pots and brushes in hand to bestow their own little drawings upon the area. Tomura had returned to his apartment for homeschool, and Dabi, so much lighter, even happier than what he'd been recently, continued to diligently clean the tables, serve the patrons, and enter the enclosure himself, his artist's eye critical and his sketches developing all the time. He'd ensured that there was still plenty of room for the study group to add their own paintings when they came by later, too. It was great to see so many things coming together, wasn't it? Then the 10 o'clock lull settling over them, Shiratoko Tomoko bounced in with her usual verve, those amber eyes aglow as he showed her around the property. She'd adored the feline space, praised the private area for them to move in and out of, and complimented the overall design. He'd then gone over the smart till, the same one she'd operated in Starbucks. Fantastic! Walked her into the kitchen. She'd cooed over the cakes and how efficiently everything was arranged, and asked if she had any questions. "When can I start?" Epic called so loudly that he felt Nabby's eyes rolling all the way from the other room. They were going to get along, he was sure of it. Then, after half an hour of working out a timetable and rate of pay, they shook hands. "I'm only a part-time student at MU, and well, now that I'll be working with the others at the Mentors Agency, I might give it all together. I've never really liked economics, you know. Everyone's so dull and serious in my course anyway." And so, from the next Monday onwards, Tomoko would work from 1300 to 2000 for 6 days a week and predominantly man the cat enclosure to ensure that paying customers had their allotted time of access, that the patrons were respectful to the felines, and that the enclosure didn't become overcrowded. She'd also be providing small pre-measured portions of cat treats to the patrons for 200 yen and made sure that the litter trays were regularly cleaned and the water dishes were always full. She told him that she couldn't believe she'd be getting paid for something she'd been doing for free. He told her that he couldn't think of anyone better to love and look after their new whiskered family members. Another rib-crushing hug had been wrapped around him before he'd had a chance to defend himself. "Welcome to the Norneko Cafe." He'd grinned, his voice a little strained. "We're really happy to have you there." The rest of the week flew by. That Monday afternoon, the study group had marveled at Dabi's work. They all asked, some shyly, others a little more firmly, if he'd add a doodle or two to their notepads, and added their own designs to the cat space. Tsuyu had brought some cute cat and love heart stickers that she'd shared around her friends. Eijiro had pinched one to sneakily press it onto Katsuki's cheek, and instead of the explosion they'd all been expecting, the blonde had blushed, asked for a similar sticker, and tapped it under the ebony-haired boy's forehead with a huff. A marvel! Ochako had floated Denki and Izuku up to the top shelves, with Tomura supervising, her smile filled with pride as they'd praised and thanked her for allowing them to add a few of the pop print stampers Inko had gotten them to make a border around the uppermost walls and ceilings. Hitoshi had had a relatively good first day back at school, as no one had bothered him about his mom, whose name had been kept out of the news. Thank God. He had a feeling that he had a certain blonde, his sidekick, and legal team to thank for that, and had proudly led his friends upstairs to show off more of Dabini's masterpieces. On Tuesday and Wednesday, the cat beds, tethered toys, litter trays, and poop scoops had arrived alongside the few items that Mitsuki had squealed, "Shouta! We couldn't not get these for the kitty cats!" at him down the phone when he'd called to thank her. There were a few activity centers, feathering balls trapped in tubes for them to chase after, mobiles of suspended soft mice bells and ribbon, 2 large exercise wheels, and a tree tower that once assembled was taller than him. It'd be perfect for the back wall between the jungle gym shelving. Then Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, moving on like the blink of an eye, the dry food and supplements for Gigi and Hime similarly arriving. Sunday morning finally came. And if the tots had been just a little more distracted than usual in their self-defense class, then he wasn't going to fault them for it. He was so pleased that they were all here and ready to bring the cats they'd helped to rescue into their forever home. God, he just hoped that they'd like it. The health and safety inspectors had certainly seemed to think that they would, with one of them even promising to come back as just a customer in a week or so's time. She'd be more than welcome, of course. Is it nearly time yet? Denki sighed after squirting half of his water bottle over his head and face. He hoped that the yoga studio would get back to him soon about accommodating him in his classes. The heat seemed to be ramping up every day. I hope Regents remembers me. Stop being so patient, Kathy. Of all people. You gotta be calm around cats, so don't go grabbing at him or anything. He advised. The cake sent Eijiro's way, expertly countered by the slightly shorter boy, who grinned at him teethily and redoubled his efforts. I know, Kachan, the other blonde replied, his tone a little wistful. I'm gonna be the best cat helper I can be, but, could you let me know if I get a little too hyper or something, please? Watching the exchange with a snickering Dabby, Shouta had ruffled those unruly mops of air as he passed them to help Ochako, who was displaying a real flair for takedowns and combos, and Tsuyu, whose heightened agility and leg strength gave them all a run for their money. With their accuracy, whilst Izuku and Ditoshi continued to work in tandem. They were all getting exceptionally good. Maybe it was worth approaching a local dojo to get them registered. The kids having accredited belts in a discipline would definitely help them to be considered for hero courses and further any other goals or ambitions they might have, wouldn't it? Shoni, do you think that they'll still remember us? Eijiro asked, his arms effectively blocking a kick sent his way by Denki. It feels like the last time we saw them was forever ago, he admitted before deflecting Katsuki's jabbing fists. I'm certain that they'll be just as happy to see you as you'll be to see them, he assured warmly. However, all of you need to bear in mind that this will be a disorienting experience for our new friends. He called across them. So if they're still a little standoffish in the first instance, don't worry. He told them, let them get settled in. Don't be concerned if they find their beds or exploring something that they'd prefer to do than have a play or a cuddle with you. He pre-warned, as much as we love them and can't wait for them to be here, we mustn't lose sight of them being living creatures with their own autonomy. Alright? We understand, Shoni. At 11:07, their cat-related prayers were finally answered. I see her, she's here. Watching as all four of his booths were filled with children, their excited faces almost smooshed against the big windows, Shouta chuckled at Becca, Dabi, Tomura, and Koji-san to follow him. The oldest Kaminari was almost as excited as his son, whilst Ingo had the difficult task of keeping the tots calm. He knew which job he'd rather be doing, and so, the cafe's door propped open, the four of them approached the Neko Nakama logoed microvan that had just pulled up outside his eatery. Tomoko's delighted face smiling at them as she hopped out of the driver's seat and approached the back of the vehicle to open the wide cat crate stacked space. Okay, let's get the older guys out first, she advised, her gloveless hands passing a grumpy-looking Gigi, his form crouched in the back of the container, to a grinning Tomura, and lightly panting Hime to Koji. Huehue and her boys were placed in his care, whilst Dabi gently cradled Homura's carrier. Then the cafe's latest residents, chuffing, grumbling, and meowing curiously. The men walked back to the eatery, whilst his newest employee started to gently pull the other crates towards the vehicle's exit. Oh! Look at their little noses twitching! Ochako stage whispered beside Izuku, her chestnut eyes locked onto a mewling Hime, whilst he and Itoshi glued their starry eyes onto the Bombay kittens, curiously shoving their little faces against the grate of their crate. Okay. Let's take them into their private room, and then when everyone's inside, we'll let them out, see if they want a drink, and then guide them to the cat flaps and into the enclosure, okay? He instructed the other males, following him. After seeing them nod their understanding, he backpedaled through the door and held it open for the others. When they were all inside, they placed the crates, the cats sang at the cool, clean air, onto their designated shelf spaces before quickly making their way back out again.
Kids, you can go into the enclosure now, all right? He grinned. Find somewhere to sit and pick up a few toys to entice them with, okay?
Smiling brightly, Katsuki and Izuku shushing Denki and Eijiro as their excitement threatened to bubble over. Such good kids. The tots quickly and carefully made their way past the shatterproof glass door that Inko gently slid out of the way, her face similarly enchanted as she giggled herself onto a beanbag. Then, venturing back into the sunshine, Koji took Reijin, who preened as the man cooed over him. Dabi sniggered at Max Katsugo, whilst the tabby hissed wildly. Tomura grinned at Kiro, who purred at attention, whilst he took Red Riot's carrier, the perky kitten bounding around excitedly with a flicking set of ears and sneaking tail. Yay, I'm so happy that I get to be here to look at the phone, too! Tomoko grinned widely, her slender form rushing to lock the van and skip after them. And is it true? Is all right? Oh, going to do the official opening tomorrow at 1700? I can't believe that I finally get to meet him! She gushed. Do you think it'd be wrong of me to ask for her autograph, a selfie? Oh, both! She asked, her energy levels already giving the study group a run for their money. Chuckling at her, Shouta gave the jade-haired woman an indulgent smile.
I'm sure he'd be more than happy to give you both, he assured. However, all I ask is that you only invite a few people to come along with you, all right? He asked. The last thing we need is a media circus. Isn't it?
That won't be a problem, she replied, her smile dimming. Ah, shit! How could he have been so insensitive?
That'll change after you've worked here for a few days,
Dabi told her as they made their way inside.
If the cat doesn't work as magic on your social life, then the air-headed people you're going to hero with will,
he offered with a light shrug.
The Nodo Neko Cafe somehow makes sure that no one is astray for long. You'll see.
Standing inside the climate-controlled area that their new feline family members would have as their quiet space, sleeping quarters, and meal station, Shouta smiled as Huawei leapt to the ground whilst he assisted her sons to do the same. In fact, with the exception of Gigi, who was now hunkered in Tomura's arms and showing no signs of leaving the nest he'd made for himself in the fawning teen's arms, and Homura, who was similarly planted onto Dabi's foot before the claimed quirk user carefully leaned down to scoop him into his arms, the cats were roaming around inquisitively. It wasn't a betting man. However, if he'd placed any serious money on Red Riot, Bats Katsugo, Hiro, and Hotaru being the first to launch themselves, Kero and Reijin not far behind, through the cat flaps and into the enclosure, then he'd be a wealthy man. The muted, elated sounds of the children filtering through the feline-friendly gaps in the lower wall sections was like music to his ears.
You two can walk them through if you like,
he offered his teens, their smiles soft as they nodded, and made their way whilst Huawei did... and she just rolled her eyes, slinked through the flap her wayward kittens had bounded through, whilst Hime, with a relieved sigh, lapped at one of the water bowls before similarly ambling through. Chuckling despite himself, Shouta eagerly left the maintenance room and made his own way to the enclosure, his body stopping short of the door to take the whole scene in. Tethered mice in hand, Hitoshi and Izuku encouraged the black lustrous kittens into a gentle play that he took a few photos of for Kimiko's memory book, whilst Inko, her smile wobbly, knelt between the two, her fingers carefully offered for the happy kids to rub against. Dabi and Tomura, lost in their own conversation and feline affection, had sat in one of the back corners under the most expansive cat tree tower, whilst Gigi, balled up in the decay quirk user's lap, settled down to snooze, and the one-eyed Homura sat proudly upon the flame quirk user's crossed legs, that cerulean gaze observing the activity with a haughty indifference. Hime, now so much cooler, Tomoko had very kindly groomed her before arrival, a special comb helping to remove some of that thick undercoat, had flopped into Ochako's teary form, that floofy tail swaying lazily as she allowed the girl to lavish her with soft touches and strokes. Hatsuki, Eijiro, Tsuyu, and Denki, their feet pressed together to form a square, sat upon the cool floor with their boisterous brood bouncing on the barrier of their legs, the sneaking toys they'd picked up to entertain them with, and a small bell-filled ball that Matsugatsugo and Red Riot were chasing around. Kaminari Koji, rivers of tears running down his face, kept taking pictures on his phone whilst he bemoaned his beloved wife's allergies. Snickering to himself, he then looked for Hahue, who, strangely, was sat by the door, that golden gaze fixed on him, questioningly. And so, needing no further invitation, he pulled the door to one side, whilst making sure that no mischievous kits were spying their chance to make a hasty exit, slipped inside, and closed it behind him before crouching down to offer his hand to the imperious Bombay, his smile fond.
"All this new, huh?"
he asked her.
"Do you think you can be happy here?"
Chuffing at him, she gave his fingers a firm headbutt before prowling around him, her glossy flank rubbing at his legs before she mewed, the side of her face sinking into his knee. Chuckling, he gave her ears, "God, so soft!" an affectionate scratch before standing and making his way to where Tomoko, her form a little overwhelmed, was sitting, his body plonking next to her on a cubed stool as she leaned against him. "Thank you," she told him quietly. "Getting to be a part of this almost every day, it's more than I ever thought I could have," she expressed after a little sniff before with a blink she leaned down to scoop Hahue, who'd mewed indignantly about being left out, up to snuggle between them.
"Now, let's see if you feel the same way when you're helping me empty 10 litter boxes."
He snickered.
"But you're welcome, of course."
He shrugged, his shoulder nudging hers in a brotherly manner.
"I meant what I said before, you know. We're very lucky to have you."
He breathed.
"I wouldn't trust our feline family members, but just anyone now, would I?"
As 1400 happened upon them, everyone in his cafe, cats included, fed and watered, Shouta welcomed Mitsuki and Kirishima Jun into the cafe for a proper introduction before waving them and their sons off. Tsuyu's father, a little skittish, had been more than happy to look at Kiro through the glass before walking his daughter and Otako home. Kaminari Koji, however, the generous man that he was, had insisted that the three get into his SUV, and that it'd be his pleasure to drive them, an ecstatic Denki more than pleased to have the girls as company. Then, having some work to catch up on, Inko had returned to her apartment whilst Izuku stayed with them until the adult self-defense lesson that evening. Strangely, the teens had foregone their usual video game marathon to stay in the enclosure. Homura, becoming more confident, had allowed Hahue to coax him into one of the tree towers, whilst Jiji is petulant, and made a firm home for himself inside Tomura's hoodie pouch, his kinked palm flicking in an annoyed twitch whenever the teen went to dislodge him. The kids now, however, with only 2 tots to play with, had taken to fully exploring their new home before leaping at a giggling Izuku and Itoshi as Tomoko watched on. Hime sprawled across her lap with heavy rolling purrs. Well, at this rate, they'd go bankrupt because none of them would want to leave the enclosure, would they? However, a text message pinging to life on his phone, Shouta found himself moving towards the closed cafe door to welcome Mimi-chan and the girls, their giddy forms already cooing over the flesh lemonade and slices of fruit cake, the kindly woman's favorite, or so Su-chan had told him, whilst he took his benefactor's arm and walked her through her completely reformatted florists. "Oh, Shouta-chan, it's beautiful. What is this?" Smiling, his left arm gesturing to the 4th booth, the eatery owner smiled.
"Unless we're incredibly busy,"
he advised.
"This booth is your knitting nook, all right?"
He offered, the 4 women tearing and gushing over the banner that Dabi had made for them.
"And you'll never have to pay to enter the cat enclosure, okay? You just might have to wait a while if there are 12 people already in there."
He smiled, their shaking arms giving him shuddering hugs whilst cotton hankies dapped at their eyes. "You are a dear sweet boy," Mimi-chan told him after a healthy mouthful of cake that had her preening. "Oh, if I was only 30 years younger, I'd just eat you up, I would." Snickering, a little voice in the back of his mind advising that you'd have to get in line. Midnight was taking him out for his first official date after Hitoshi and Denki's birthday party, apparently. Shouta leaned down and pressed a chaste kiss to her temple.
I don't doubt it, he told her whilst the woman cooed. Now come on, there are some new members of our family that I'd love to introduce you to.